All right, today we are diving into this huge new trade deal between the US and the EU. And you got to hear this. In Washington, they're calling it a historic win. But over in Europe, they're using words that are, well, a lot darker. Is this a modern masterpiece of an alliance, or is it basically a forced submission? To figure that out, we've got to look at the two completely different stories being told on each side of the Atlantic. It's like they're not even talking about the same deal. Okay, let's start with the view from Washington. The White House is painting this as an absolutely monumental victory, a real game changer that completely rebalances global trade. Yeah, the official line is that they're making global history. They're saying this deal totally resets the economic relationship between the two biggest economies on the planet. The language they're using is super triumphant, things like a generational modernization of the alliance. Big words.
So what's in it? Well, for starters, this massive number. We're talking $750 times billion. That's a commitment from the EU to buy American energy exports by 2028. And from the US perspective, this is a huge, huge boost for American energy dominance.
And that's not all. On top of that energy deal, the EU has also agreed to pump another $600 billion in new investments into the United States, all during President Trump's current term. These are just staggering figures, right? And they're aimed squarely at boosting the American economy. So, digging into the details, the U.S. is pointing to a bunch of key wins. The EU is going to get rid of all its tariffs on American industrial goods. That means new markets for farmers, ranchers, manufacturers, you name it. But here's the flip side. The U.S. gets to slap a new 15% tariff on EU goods to help close that trade deficit. And they've also tightened up the rules to make sure the benefits don't, leak out to other countries. Oh, and the EU is also going to buy a lot more U.S. military gear. Okay, so that's the story from Washington. It sounds pretty great, right? A historic win. Now let's hop across the pond to Europe, because the reaction there, well, it's anything but a celebration. Honestly, calling it downbeat is probably the understatement of the year. And this right here just shows you the total disconnect. It's wild. The US says generational modernization, Europe says damage control. The US says fundamentally rebalancing, Europe says an uneven deal. Washington calls it unprecedented market access, and for some in Europe, it's a dark day. It's like they're living in two different realities.
And the view from France was especially brutal. Their Prime Minister, François Bayrou, came right out and said it. It is a dark day when an alliance of free peoples resigns itself to submission. Submission. Wow, that's not the kind of language you expect to hear between allies.
Then you've got Germany, Europe's economic engine. Their chancellor, Friedrich Merz, warned this deal would substantially damage the country's finances. And that's even as he kind of admitted that, given the circumstances, his negotiators probably couldn't have done much better. So, not great. So this begs the question, right? If European leaders hate this deal so much, why on earth did they sign it? Well, this chart here tells the whole story. They were staring down the barrel of a threatened 50% tariff from the US. 50%! So they agreed to a 15% tariff instead. It was basically a choice between bad and catastrophic. So for Brussels, this was never, ever about winning. It was all about damage control. It was about taking the hit they could survive to avoid the one that would have been a total knockout. Like the EU's trade commissioner said, it was the best they could get under some really, really tough circumstances. But to really get why this divide is so deep, we need to zoom out a bit, because this is about way more than just tariffs and trade figures. What we're really seeing is a massive, fundamental shift in the entire relationship between Europe and the United States. And a lot of analysts are using this German word to describe what's going on, Zeitenwende. It basically means a turning point, a paradigm shift. That moment when one era ends and a totally new one begins. And many believe that's exactly where the Transatlantic Alliance is right now. The first big Zeitenwende for Europe recently was Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But now people are saying this trade deal is triggering a second one. It's this slow, dawning realization in Europe that maybe, just maybe, they can't count on the US as that reliable, traditional ally anymore. That they might have to forge their own path. And if you look at this timeline, you can see how we got here. It starts with criticism during Trump's first term about trade and NATO. Then, bam, May 2025, the threat of 50% tariffs. By July, the deal is signed under that threat. And what happens after? You've got Germany's Chancellor Merz, a guy who was always a huge supporter of the alliance, now talking about step-by-step European independence from the United States. That's a huge shift. So what comes next? What does all this mean for the future? I mean, where does arguably the world's most important alliance even go from here? Okay, if you take away anything from this, it should be these key points. For the US, this deal is a pure expression of a transactional, America-first foreign policy. For Europe, it's a massive wake-up call that's speeding up their push for what they call strategic autonomy in both defense and economics. And maybe the biggest takeaway of all, the trust, the fundamental trust that used to be the bedrock of this relationship, it's been seriously, seriously damaged. So at the end of the day, the deal is done. But it leaves us with this huge question. Is this the start of a new, purely transactional alliance? Or is it the beginning of the end for the old one we all knew? The answer to that is going to shape global politics for decades. No doubt about it.